Okay, boys and girls, we have a mad case today. I'm just going to dive straight in. In 2013, on October 10th, a young girl was found wandering outside the GPO on O'Connell Street in Dublin. Onlookers were growing concerned because she looked to be in a distressed state. So the guards at Store Street Garda Station were called, and a couple of them came down to check her out. She was wearing a purple hooded top, dark coloured jeans, black flat shoes, and a grey woolly jumper or woolly cardigan. It is said that these were believed to have been bought in one of the major retailers here. So I'm going to guess Pennies or Dunnes. I'd probably more lean to Pennies because there's a Pennies on O'Connell Street. But yeah, that doesn't really matter either way. The girl looked to be about 14 years old. She was around 5'6". She was slim with blonde hair. Essentially couldn't get anything out of her. She wasn't speaking. As I said, she was in a distressed state. So they decided to take her back to the Garda station. And here they actually called some doctors to come and examine her. So again, she wasn't speaking. She was kind of gesturing with hands, with her hands, and she gestured that she was 14. And she was using kind of like bits of broken English. It is said because of her appearance, the blonde hair and stuff, it was assumed that she might have been from Eastern Europe. She began drawing pictures for them. So she drew one of a plane, and she drew one of lying down with men on a bed with men around her. So it was kind of quickly drawn to the conclusion that she could have been a victim of sex trafficking, and that she had been brought into the country like that from one of the countries in Eastern Europe. Essentially, she wasn't eating, she wasn't talking, so it was very hard to actually try find her. She had braces, so she had dental work, so they did try and inquire with paediatric, orthodontists around the country to see if anybody recognised the work or recognised her. Gardaí asked assistance from the Missing Persons Bureau, Interpol, the Forensic Science Laboratory, the Immigration Bureau, the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Unit, and the Garda Officer for Youth Affairs. The Gardaí set up stops along O'Connell Street, close to the GPO and stuff like that, to stop cars and question them. There was also door-to-door inquiries. They also took on the grueling task of trying to go through the CCTV leading up to when the girl was found around the GPO and around the city centre to see if they could see where she came from, and they couldn't. The girl had been put into the care of the HSE, and she had been giving a guardian ad litem, Orla Ryan, who said that she was extremely concerned and happy that she was, in the care of the HSE and being looked after, and that they were following all lines of inquiry. Speaking of lines of inquiry, after they put out an appeal with the, the description of her and the event, they did have, some help from the public. They had like 115 lines of inquiry, but none of them led anywhere. They checked all B&Bs and guest houses in the city centre, people who had booked but then didn't show up, or people who, had checked in but just hadn't come back or hadn't checked out. Specialist child interviewers were also brought in from all over the country to try help communicate and get through to the girl, but again, this was a lost cause. So almost a month later, the Gardaí went to the High Court and took the unprecedented step to request releasing a picture of the underage girl. The HSE actually opposed this. They didn't think it was, it would be good for her, but the judge allowed it. And the photo that would become known as GPO Girl was released. So the photo was quite dodgy looking. It wasn't actually they didn't get her to pose and get a photo taken. One of the Gardaí had actually taken photos, when they arrived at the GPO. And this is the one that was used. So this is her actually when they found her at the GPO. As you can see, her hair is up. She has her finger into her mouth. She's sucking on it or biting on it or whatever. She does look a bit, it looks a bit like, oh, is she okay? The reason the Gardaí had to use the kind of random dodgy photo from outside the GPO was apparently after that, the girl would not allow herself to be photoed. So I'm sure they were thinking maybe again, if she had been a victim of trafficking, had phones or cameras or something been used, then, I don't know. But yeah, she wouldn't let them. Not even 24 hours had passed when they got a call from a man in Clonmel called Joe Brennan. And he told them that this girl was actually 25-year-old Samantha Azzopardi. She was actually from Australia, and the reason she had been in Ireland was The month previous, she had come to visit Joe. So Joe used to go out with her mom like years and years ago when he lived in Australia. And so she went over to visit him and his two sons and spent like a month with them. And as far as he was concerned, she then got the bus back up to Dublin to get to the airport, like to go home. So they checked out his story. They had her name. So they made, contact with the Australian authorities and with her family to, corroborate all this. And it was true. She was 25-year-old Samantha. Just before I go on with the story of Samantha, it would not be Ireland if there hadn't also been like a major screw up. So the PNA, the Psychiatric Nurses Association, was sending an email containing the details of this teenager found in Dublin, alongside the picture of her, to people who worked within the HSE, the Health Service Executive. And they accidentally sent it to people who worked in a business that had a similar domain to the HSE. But anyway, other people got it. So they got all the information on this case that hadn't, the photos hadn't been released at this point. The journal.ie spoke to the owner of the business, and he said that it was actually quite distressing because along with her photos, there was like details about her like physical and mental, condition. And he said like he had a daughter and stuff, and he just found it really, really weird to get it. Apparently the PNA had been asked by the Gardaí to see if members of their trade union had ever seen this girl and, had they ever treated her before. So it was then revealed that Samantha, who had up to 40 different identities, had basically just made the whole thing up. Why? I don't know. Had she made it up to try get attention, get money, get something? I don't know. So she was then actually transferred over to the adult mental health system in the country. A psychiatrist who carried out an assessment on her said it was found that she was not suffering from a mental disorder under the Mental Health Act, and no order was required from the court under that act. They did, however, say that she was suffering from a mental condition that would make her vulnerable. There was no details obviously given of the mental condition. So apparently Samantha then actually requested to be sent home back to Australia. And so the Gardaí then allowed this, because I thought this was not funny, but Gardaí said, following request from the troubled 25-year-old, she was put on a flight from Dublin Airport. A statement read, in consultation with all of the relevant authorities, An Garda Síochána have facilitated Miss Azzopardi's repatriation with a view to reuniting her with her family and the authorities in Australia. And just when I read that, I was like, if that was a black or brown person, it wouldn't be repatriation, it would be deportation. Gardaí escorted her on the plane back to Australia, and apparently once again, she just didn't speak for like the whole trip. That's a long journey. The investigation into finding out who the teenager was, which was titled Operation Good Shepherd, cost €200,000, and there was 2,000 man hours spent. So obviously it was a bit of a for the Gardaí. Apparently authorities had considered, charging her with wasting police time and suing her for the money that was wasted. But I think just after the psychiatric consultation and stuff like that, it was just like, no, just send her back. Now, boys and girls, you might think that is the end of Samantha. But no. But to tell you the rest of Samantha's story, I think I should tell you the beginning of Samantha's story. So I'm sure you can probably guess that we don't have a lot of information on Samantha's past and her history and stuff like that. She was born in August 1988 in Campbelltown in New South Wales, Australia. There isn't a lot said about her family. Obviously, we know that her parents are separated or divorced because your mom was, in a long-term relationship for a while with her mother. I don't know if she has siblings. I don't know if both her parents are still alive, but it was said that, it was arranged for them to meet her at the airport when she arrived back. So she does have some sort of family. After all this, started to come out, one of her former bosses actually came out to, you know, make a statement, get their 15 minutes of fame. So Chris Noons, who was her employer at Pancakes on the Rocks, which was a restaurant in Campbelltown, said that she was a very sweet girl, but that she didn't fit in with her peers. She said that she actually didn't really make effort to try and make friends with them. She says, like, Sammy was a nice girl, so I get the impression she probably was a waitress or something when she was a teenager there. Sorry, I thought this was a bit funny. I think she was late for her shifts a few times or didn't turn up a couple of times. I think we were quite glad when she left. Yeah, so I mean, that's the only kind of one that came across. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the only job she had. Okay, so the first incident I can come across of like scamming and stuff is 2010. So she's about 22 at this stage. And one of the sources says that by this case that I'm talking about now, in 2010, it says that she was already wanted in Sydney and New South Wales for like fraud and things like that. So it obviously had started before then. I'd say probably in her late teens maybe. So she's in Brisbane and she poses as a 14-year-old teenager called Dakota Johnson. She basically alleged that she had, you know, been sexually abused, and a Brisbane support service, you know, took her in and they helped and they gave her food and they gave her shelter and all this stuff. And she basically said that like she wanted to continue her education. So I don't know, was this like, did she get them to help her get into this? Because this is wild. So I don't really, it starts to get a bit confusing for me, to be honest. All she had was a letter of introduction from the prestigious Swiss private school La Rose, a receipt from a bank on Lord Howe Island, and a pink diary chronicling sexual abuse at the hands of a relative. A school accepted her. I don't really understand what the receipt had to do with anything. Like from a bank. I don't know if it's supposed to be kind of like a bank draft type thing to pay for the school. But the Brisbane support service, concerned anyway, they called the guards. They called the police anyway, and so they obviously, you know, were trying to question her and stuff, and they just didn't believe that her story made sense, what she was saying. It just, you know, so they actually searched some of her belongings, and on her laptop, now it did say that all she had was blah blah blah, but now she has a laptop. So on her laptop, they found pictures of her with family, it says, in like Sydney and stuff like that. They found the letter from the Swiss school on the laptop, like that had been created on the laptop. Delete your crimes. So then obviously they went on to find that the bank receipt was fake. Miss Azzopardi was charged and brought to the Brisbane Magistrates Court on September 14th. And she was charged with one count of contravening a direction, possessing objects with intent to forge documents, and 2 counts of false representation. And then there are just some kind of random ones that don't necessarily have like dates and stuff. Like one note just says that she created a Facebook page under the pseudonym Emily Ellen Sheehan, using her own photograph and posed as a young schoolgirl. But then the next one, she created another Facebook page called Emily Skibaris. She seems to like the name Emily. And so she posed again as a teenager who was a gymnast. And so her biography said that she was from Geraldton in Australia. But at 7, she moved to Moscow to, you know, train to be a gymnast, and that she was, you know, ready to compete. Now, those kind of, I think, there doesn't seem to be a lot of kind of connection to them, you know, like that she'd done other things as well. But in 2011, obviously travelled to Perth. Just a reminder, she is now 23 years old and she makes friends with a teenager. Now, I don't know where she's going or where she should be in places where she's, you know, making friends with teenagers. But she tells them that her name is Emily Azzopardi. She didn't even try on that one. Anyway, so she makes friends with her and again tells her that she's a top gymnast. She actually stays over with this girl's family. Again, if she kind of tries to pull off being 14, the girl is probably only 14, 15. I also wonder then, like, where was she staying the other nights? Like, where was she staying her normal time? You know, the rest of the time, like if she was staying with them once a week or twice a week at the weekend or something, where was she supposed to be the rest of the time? Why wasn't she in the same school as the other girl? You know, like, I don't know why these weren't asked. She told that girl's mother that she was a top gymnast and that she had been ranked in Russia, like in the under 16s, blah, 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 blah. A month later, Emily posted on her Facebook saying that her family had been murdered. So basically she said, she posted like an article to a murder-suicide in France. She likes to travel, this girl, even if it's only in her head. So it was this man who murdered his wife and his 15-year-old daughter and then killed himself. So she basically put it up. It was said in the article that like there had been it was twin daughters, so it was one daughter, and she basically was putting it up saying like she was the surviving twin. This just gets, I don't know if worse is even the right word, it just gets madder. Like, so the family then like they say like that they want to adopt her or foster her or something like that, and at this point she then claims to be in the United States with a judge who specializes in adoptions. How handy was that? So then she done something a little different and decided to become a boy this time and posed as this judge. She created email addresses and all this jazz, and so had communication from the judge to this family. She then met the family again in Sydney, and so she tells them that she was afraid to go back to Perth because she had been raped there. They then tried to enroll her in school, I'm guessing back in Perth, so if they're going to adopt her, that's where she's going to have to go. So they tried to enroll her in, I'm assuming, the school that their daughter goes to, and this is when the birth cert is proved to be fake. There seems to be no mentions of any scams in 2012, so I would like to think that she actually done some jail time, because it seems like there's not a lot of jail time being given out. And then obviously she arrived with us in 2013. Now, that was not her last trip to Ireland. She went home, she went back, and then somehow she went to Canada. I don't know if she got up to anything there. Then she went back to Australia. So then, in 2014, Samantha, under a fake name, applied for a visa with the British Embassy, and she got this. And she needed the visa to come to Ireland to work as an au pair for a family that had two children. Two young kids, they were like 2 and 4, and they lived in Leitrim. So she got here and she was working for them for like a month or so, and then she actually went to open a bank account, and it was here that her documents were, deemed to be forged or fake or whatever. And it's funny because the bank were able to do that. The British Embassy were not able to determine that whatever they gave her, whatever she gave them, like a birth cert or whatever to prove, who she was, they weren't able to deem it was false. She then got through from like the airport in Australia to our airport through, with her passport and stuff like that. Nothing, fine. And it was some random bank down in Leitrim that were able to determine that it was false. She had also apparently claimed to be, I think to the family, she would tell them stories about like that she was from like a royal family, like, somehow to the UK. And I mean, we're probably more likely to know about them. And then to Sweden, like she was a member of like the royal family in Sweden. She was probably saying like I'm a cousin twice removed from like the Duke of something. I don't know. So the bank obviously notified the Gardaí, and before they could go and arrest her or question her or anything, she left. She got on a plane and headed back to Australia. Actually, I don't know if she flew back to Australia, because she then later in the year ended up in Canada again. So in September 2014, she walked into a healthcare centre in Calgary. She claimed to be 14-year-old Aurora Hepburn. Pick some more normal names. Maybe I'll get away with it more. So she claims to have been abducted. She claims to have been abducted and had endured years of sexual abuse and torture. So obviously, the child protection services and stuff like that were called. She was brought into, it was a healthcare centre, so they probably had beds there or something, but there is a photo of her in a hospital bed. So like that, she was, being treated and stuff like that. So the police over there then, tried to find out who she was, all this, and, after a few weeks of getting nowhere, I don't know how, but they were told about the case here in Dublin. So they touched base with the Gardaí, and one thing led to another, and they were able to identify that this was Samantha Azzopardi. The police service in Calgary actually then released her photos anyway to the public, and basically said like if anybody had been in contact with her, if they knew anything about her whereabouts, her movements, any of this, to get in touch. I don't really know, was she done for anything there? No other sources I see can say. But again, she was sent back to Australia. I think everybody's answer is just to send her back to Australia. It's like, no, we won't give you prison time, or we won't do any of this stuff, just leave, get out of our hair, like. So in 2016 in Australia, Samantha arrived in Sydney as 13-year-old Harper Hart and enrolled herself in the Good Shepherd like boarding school, private school. Sorry, I should probably say, I think I said Operation Good Shepherd earlier. The operation was called Operation Shepherd and this school is called the Good Shepherd. Sorry, I think that the Good Shepherd was just in my head. She claimed to be under the Witness Protection Program in America. Now bear in mind, she has an Australian accent, I'm assuming. But maybe it's supposed to be that she was in America as a tourist and saw a crime and they sent her back. I don't know. So it wasn't long before she was found out about this one. Now, I think the impression I get is maybe it was a boarding school and she, done whatever things she had to do, whatever scams to get in. And that's why she was charged with like financial fraud, obtaining money through deception. Because otherwise, I don't know what money she was taking. So I think it was kind of like, well, your room and your board and all this was paid for. So like you gained from that. I think that's what happened in this one. Now it does say for this one, she was sentenced to a year in prison. And then we are in 2017, where police are called to the home of a foster family after concerns of a child who was in their care. So they must have started to have suspicions or something. I'm assuming it was them who rang. And so when they arrived, they arrested the 28-year-old woman. And again, she was charged with like obtaining, obtaining financially through, deception and stuff. Because obviously, again, they were, they housed her, they were feeding her. For this one, she was refused bail. We are now at 2019. And Samantha has up to 100 charges. There's Harper Hernandez, there's Saka, must be like Cher. And so she is actually minding 2 children for a couple. The kids were 4 and 10 months. And so basically, from what I can gather, it was like Mr. and Mrs. Jarvis, the Jarvis shopping centre. And she started using Mrs. Jarvis's identity and pretending to be a casting agent. And she befriended a 12-year-old girl and said she could get her a job, like as a voiceover for the next Pixar film. If that was a man doing that, like if there was a man in his 20s doing that with teenage boys or teenage girls, he would be called a predator. There are serial killers who have used this like game to get their victims. Like, maybe you think I'm overreacting, I don't know, but like I just think if I was saying to you now, so a 25-year-old man done this and he befriended a 12-year-old girl, you'd be like, lock him up, he's a predator. Like, so the family become aware of this. So what I think might have happened is they started to, like, they were aware of this and there was kind of, they were kind of catching on to her. And then she asked, could she take the kids out on a picnic? Now, if you thought she was being a bit weird like that, maybe you wouldn't. So I don't know if this timeline kind of overlaps. I'm not really sure from the sources. I find it a bit confusing. So she says she's going to take them out to a picnic. And so they live in an area called Geelong. And instead of staying there and going to the picnic, she travelled 200 kilometres with the children to another area called the Bendigo. I think like it would be considered crossing state lines or whatever. And here, like that's already scary. That's scary. That's an escalation of all parts. She then puts on a school uniform and goes into a counselling service with the children, I assume. She then got some randomer to ring the counselling service as her dad, posing as her dad. Who was deciding that that's an okay thing to do? Now, the only thing I was thinking was, had she paid like someone, a homeless person or something like that, I'll give you 20 euro or something if you just make this phone call for me. Something like that, maybe. Because no kind of person in their sound mind who doesn't need money would be or should be agreeing to doing that. I'm not really sure, if the counselling service then caught on or what it was, because she left and she went into a department store. And here, police must have been alerted then because a police officer saw her and like apprehended her with the kids. So the prosecutor, Christy Churchill, announced that Azzopardi was going to be pleading to 7 charges. She said that she was pleading to 3 of child stealing. That, am I the only one who thinks that like that makes it feel less like abduction, you know, and then child stealing? I've never heard that term before. She also obtained $6,250 by deception. So I'm probably thinking that that's for like, you know, how au pairs kind of get like their room and board and stuff like that, and then a little bit of money and stuff like that. So I'm guessing that that's what that is. The theft of an iPad, handling stolen goods, and causing a false police report to be made regarding child welfare concerns and physical assault. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison. The Melbourne magistrate Joanna Metcalf had said that like it was a bizarre crime. Like it is. It's you're going beyond now just pretending something yourself. You're involving other people. Most importantly, you're involving children. After all this kind of started coming out, a US backpacker came forward called Emily Bamberger. Remember that name? And basically she said that Samantha told her that her name was Annika Decker and that she was Swedish royalty and that she had been kidnapped as a little girl. As part of the trial, Samantha had to undergo obviously like psychiatric evaluations and stuff. And so the report basically said that she had a remarkably unstable sense of identity. There was one source that said that the court had heard about like severe abuse in her past. So I don't know if that kind of explains the lack of family or what it is, or like again, she could be just making that up, we don't know. Which is sad because like I'm casting doubt now even on the fact that, you know, in court she said that she had abuse and that's what happens when these false claims are made and people doubt the real claims. She is said to be diagnosed with schizophrenia and severe personality disorders. One report also said pseudologia fantastica, which basically means like a pathological liar, but I feel the French makes it sound more, I think we use that as a very throwaway term, like, oh no, blah blah blah, you're like, my ex is a pathological liar, this type of thing. But they basically say like that it's to try use fantasies to recreate like a happy childhood. So then maybe maybe she did have this traumatic childhood and this is why she keeps going back to that age. Like she always goes back to 13 and 14. Yeah, I don't think she's never used 15, so I was 13 and 14. So I'd say whatever happened then. So she was released in May 2021 for the whole like child stealing incident. And later that year, she was like arrested again, or another investigation was done because again, she was posing as a 14-year-old girl. Again, I'm going to read a bit because there's a lot to this one as well. This news article anyways from August 2022 this year. So she's still at it. So this article basically says that she's going to spend at least 6 weeks in prison for pretending to have been an abused French teenager living in Sydney. So basically, again, she went to this charity called Jewish House. It was like a religious charity service or whatever. And again, she obviously claimed that, you know, she was abused and all this stuff. And so the police, you know, they called the police. And she obviously knew at this point they were onto her. So she tried to leave before they got there. And so when the police did arrive, Samantha said that her name was Ensley Cohen and that she had fled France because she had been, you know, abused. She told them that she was in Australia then with a foster family. So the police drove her around the area for 5 hours trying to find the foster family's home. Again, like here in Ireland, she was using broken English and, you know, so she was claiming that she couldn't, you know, speak English or whatever. And then at the station when they brought her back, there was an officer who spoke French. And so he started trying to talk to her, you know, and she just wouldn't answer. She was like, ah, heck. Basically, they figured out who she was because then a New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice responded to the police's serious harm risk report and said that they recognised some of the similarities with another con that Samantha had done. They took her fingerprints, which probably would have been the easiest thing to do in the first place, to be honest, and it confirmed she was 33-year-old Samantha Azzopardi. And even then, she still wouldn't admit to it. So when they gave her paperwork to sign, she signed it. Not as that Elsie Cohen or Ensley, whatever that one was. She signed it as Emily Bamberger. Tell you one thing, she has a great memory. She also declined to get her mugshot being taken. So again, we know that's she never lets her photo be taken. So when she was in Canada, some of the photos I'll put up like that, again, they're not photos where she's posing her face on or whatever. Like there's the one in the hospital bed where I think it looks nearly like they've sneakily taken it, and then the other one she looks a bit like in it. Now I will put other ones up, and I don't know, I'm guessing maybe now because she's kind of more known, the journalists in Australia have obviously been following her and stuff, so now they have more photos of her. So there are actually more photos, and I'm not trying to be funny, right? There's a photo from when she was posing and friends with that girl. I would assume that that's the girl in the photo with her. Like, she looks young. I mean, there's probably filters on that photo and stuff, but she looks young. You know, I probably wouldn't put her at 13, 14, but I'd put her at maybe 17, you know what I mean? I think even there's a filter so her eyes look real nice and big and stuff like this. But in these other photos, and I'm not trying to be mean, but she looks her age. Like, she looks late 20s anyway. Do you know what I mean? Just her face. I know they're saying like because she has a slim body and she's small and stuff like this, so you can get away with stuff like that. But I think looking at her face, she looks like an adult. And I have to imagine that she has looked like an adult for a long time. Now I will say in the GPO girl photo, I do think she looks like her face is more sunken and stuff like that. Again, that could just be she was just skinny at the time, I don't know. Just to do with this case then, again, kind of some more reports and stuff that were done. So it is apparent that the accused is a compulsive liar and suffers from several mental health issues, which no doubt is a catalyst for her offending. So that's all the information I kind of have up to basically up till now, up until last month. I don't know, like even in that last part when they're saying like, you know, this is the reason, like she suffers with severe mental health issues and this is the reason why she keeps, you know, committing these offences and doing all these things, and she is escalating, like it is getting worse. She needs help. Like even, you know, oh, this is all funny and stuff, she needs help. She even did like that, put her for 6 months or 6 weeks or a year or whatever. If you want to do that to like punish her for whatever the crimes are, fine. But she needs to then, as part of that, there should be court ordered mental health services available to her, even if the sentence is you know served in one of them. Now I don't know how good or bad Australia's mental health service is. I know ours isn't the greatest, but again, like we have the Central Mental Hospital, which I've seen people saying like there's horror stories about it, but I don't know, like there has to be, even if it's court ordered counselling, you know, court ordered therapy that she has to go to every week, and if she doesn't go, well then, you know, that kind of thing. I don't know, but there has to be more to do for her and for others. Like you do, in a way, you have to feel sorry for her if this is genuine. She just needs to do these things to try live in some fantasy that she is this age, you know, like, because in all fairness, right, she doesn't gain that much money. I know they're saying, oh, you got $6,000 and stuff like this, but it's not a lot. She's not, you know, living it up. The only thing is, I know they were kind of saying, like one of the sources was saying, like, where is the money coming from for like to fly to these different places and stuff like that? I think she needs more. It's just so prolific, and I genuinely think it's gonna keep escalating into this fantasy world, you know, and yeah, I don't know, I think she needs help. Anyway, that is the story of the GPO girl, the long winding story that starts before and after the GPO girl. But I thought it was a mad case, and the more I looked at it, I was like, oh my god, she's done so much stuff. It's not just here in Ireland. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you do remember it, or if this is kind of the first time you're hearing of it. Obviously, then if you're outside of Ireland, I'm sure you probably didn't hear it, but if you did, let me know. And if not, let me know what you think of it. And let me know what you think about her, you like that, her mental health situation, and what you think. Do you think prison is enough and that it should be a more serious sentence? Because I could also agree with that. I don't think her only doing these itty bitty things and then being let go to go do this again in another part. Like, Australia is huge. Do you know what I mean? Never mind leaving that country. Australia is huge. She could do it so many times. So I do think longer sentences, but I definitely think there should be more intervention for her. But let me know what you think. Yeah, I hope you are all well. And I don't know if there's anything else to say. Thank you very much for watching. Again, lots and lots of comments and stuff coming in, even when I'm not kind of being as active as I'd like to be. And I just really appreciate it. I think there's a lot of new viewers incoming. So Hello. I know that's kind of the thing people say they're the start of the videos. So yes, hello and welcome, Kate Mila Fulcher. And yeah, hopefully we will see you all in the next video. Thanks. Bye.